He is Bill Robertson, president and commissioner at the United States Hockey League. He has worked in the NHL. Minnesota Wild is a big deal up in Minnesota, as has been in Southern California with the Ducks, with all sorts of sporting events in Anaheim and with Disney. And we're going to talk about his career. I've heard he's a pretty captivating storyteller, Bill Robertson. I'm Bryan Fenley, national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. And this is the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley at Bryan Fenley on Twitter. So when people say, Bill, you are a captivating storyteller, what makes them think that?
Well, I think, Brian, one of the things it's always been my motto is to be a relationship builder. And I'm really about the people that I worked with or worked for. I think that's why people look at me as someone that is a really good storyteller and has a lot of stories, since I've worked in professional and amateur sports for over 30 years. So I do have a lot of great stories and a lot of great memories, both working in Southern California and working in the great state of Minnesota.
What's a story about your dad and what he went through during World War II that's inspiring to you?
Well, you bring that up. My dad never really talked much about his time in the war, only at certain points. And later in life, I had to really pin him down to understand what he did. He was a mechanic and helped fix planes, but he also introduced all the intramural sports to the Army folks that were on the ground in Guam, and did a lot of work in sports, taught swimming, amongst other things. And my dad is one of my idols, and was a humble man. And I've tried to take after a lot of what he provided, his values. And I had a great family, great parents, and miss my dad a lot. He's no longer with us, but I know he's looking down at me today and every day and smiling.
One of his joys that you took from him was he loved hockey. You love hockey. How much, when you wanted to take the path of hockey in your career, did you want to do it in a way to feel like you were honoring your dad or following in his footsteps, but at the same time, Bill, creating your own path as well?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I mean, you grow up in Minnesota, you learn to skate outside, and that's just what we did when you're kids. But I also played basketball, I played football, I played soccer, and baseball was my first love. Now golf and baseball are still my passions as far as sports outside of the sport I work in. But I never played competitive hockey. And the chance that I stumbled into the NHL was really remarkable, because I was working for the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves, and they were recruiting to hire a head of communications, and the owner or operator of the Target Center in Minneapolis, I had worked for the new president in Anaheim, Tony Tavares, and they set me up on a couple calls, and then I flew out to Anaheim and interviewed for the job, and to work for the Walt Disney Company, as well as work in professional sports and start up an NHL franchise in that great marketplace in Orange County, California, couldn't be beat. So I've had a very fun career in hockey, and then took that all the way on to the Minnesota Wild, where I was there for 13 and a half years as their vice president of communications and broadcasting, and then 7+ years as the commissioner of the Western Collegiate Hockey Association, Division I college hockey. And now I'm in my 5th month with the United States Hockey League as their president and commissioner. So I've had a storied career in hockey, but if you ask me what my first love was, I wouldn't be honest if I wouldn't say I was a baseball player. I dreamed of playing Major League Baseball for the Minnesota Twins or another team. And Paul Molitor was my idol growing up. And I went to the same high school as Molly, and thought at that point I would end up in that area. It's the same school that Joe Mauer went to as well. And in the area, we had Jack Morris, who grew up in St. Paul, and Dave Winfield, who grew up in St. Paul. So there's a great history of baseball in the state of Minnesota. But I would say I'm a sports person. I love all sports, and hockey, there's no better people in it. The players, the officials, and all the people around the game are phenomenal, both at the amateur level and the professional level.
Bill Robertson is with us, president and commissioner, United States Hockey League. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. You mentioned so many of those legends in baseball, and they won so many accolades. You might not be professional baseball, but you yourself over the course of your career have won a lot of accolades as someone who works in communications, has worked in PR. What do people see in you that makes you such an influential and confident and decorated communicator in the way in which you work with these pro franchises that has garnered so much positive attention?
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I've always tried to approach my job as a communications professional, knowing that the people that are covering the sport have a job to do. And I always wanted to be honest and ethical and transparent in everything I did. Now, that does not mean I can tell them everything that's going on in the organization, but certainly I can help facilitate what they need or get them to the right person. And certainly I never wanted to talk about something I didn't know about. And if I didn't know about the topic, I would say, I really don't know that, but let me get you an answer to that question from somebody that may know that. So I always tried to do that. And at the outset, I told you I'm a relationship builder. My energy all flowed from building all these great relationships over the course of my career. And I love meeting people and talking to them and finding out what their backgrounds were, whether they're media or people I worked with. And I've had so many people that have either worked for me or have gone on that I worked with have gone on to great careers, whether it's in the communications field. Many are running professional sports franchises or athletic directors at universities. So I feel very blessed that I have a stellar of people that I could go to if I ever needed advice on any topic.
How has that energy that you're talking about been shown in the forefront of what you're doing with the United States Hockey League in the 5 months? How do I see your energy coming across with what you're doing in the early goings of your tenure here?
Well, I think some of the things we're trying to do is we try to revamp our whole communications practice and how we're doing it at the USHL, both from our press releases and our social media aspects. Those are things we're trying to change and make it even more user friendly for the fans that are following the USHL. And mind you, we're not the NHL. We're not Division I college hockey, but so many of these players in our league go on to play either Division I hockey or and on top of that play professional hockey, whether it's in Europe or in the National Hockey League. So you have to be really in tune with what people are looking for. I always used to walk around the press box as the head of communications. I wasn't the guy keeping score of the game or writing down all the statistical things. That wasn't my area of expertise, and nor did I want to do that, to be honest. I wanted to build a relationship. So I'd walk the press box. I'd take one side on one period and one side on the other period, or during a baseball game, I'd walk up, and I've had many of the great professional broadcasters come up to me and say, boy, you get a lot of miles in walking up and down, taking getting we need. People from Vin Scully to Dick Enberg to people like Gary Thorne, are all people that I've worked with. I just come to the top of my head and said, Bill, you're going to wear yourself out if you do this. There's 162 baseball games. You can't do that every night. But I did it every night because I thought it was important that I checked on the broadcasters during the game at a timeout or in between innings, not to disrupt their flow as they're calling a game or analyzing a game, but wanted to talk to them and make sure they had everything they needed. When they came to a game in Minnesota or in Anaheim, we gave them everything they wanted.
Any franchise or any entity that hires you is getting everything they could ever want in bringing you on. And one of the interesting things is you brought up Dick Enberg, and is someone who has been a role model for me and actually has been very grateful to be a family friend before he passed. And I wanted to know what memories you cherish most from your interactions with him in getting to work with him.
Well, I mean, there was different levels. I worked with him when he was a broadcaster, both football, NFL football for NBC, but also talked to him on many occasions when he came to Anaheim Stadium. He had different stints with the Angels. Now, he was not a broadcaster for the Angels when I was working there, but he'd come out quite often and I would pick his brain. I told him that when I was a young boy, I went to the old Metropolitan Stadium and sat up right there. You could sit right next to the booth. And in between innings, I'd pop up and listen to the conversation between, at the time, it was Don Drysdale and Dick Enberg doing the Angel games on radio, and remember those conversations vividly, and told him I wanted to become Dick Enberg. And I told the same story to Vin Scully when he came and did NFL football. And I have so many cherished memories, but Dick Enberg was the consummate pro and prepared as well as anybody I ever saw. But he had the time to spend with a young boy becoming a man, wanting to get into this great field like you have too, Bryan. So I'm happy for you. You're doing what you want to do and you're chasing your dreams. I think that's what the world is all about these days. But Dick was great. Vin Scully was great. Gary Thorne was great. There's so many of those type of people out there that I cherish. So many great broadcasters.
A lot of great broadcasters that you've had the opportunity to work with, and you idolize them. We all idolize them, but we also look up to you. And as someone who is motivated by all that you've done, it's really neat to have this conversation with you. Bill Robertson is with us, President, Commissioner, United States Hockey League. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Before you got to the USHL, Bill, you had a really fun time with the Western Collegiate Hockey Association in those years you were there. When you think of your gratitude for being with that entity, where does your mind take you?
Well, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears to the WCHA, and I had worked with the league when they had their tournament, their end of season tournament at the XL Energy Center in St. Paul when I was with the Wild, and I helped out on the we did all the broadcast work for them. I was in the press box every game because I thought it was important representing the Wild that I be there. And then when this job came up, I had the opportunity to interview for it, and I was lucky enough to get it. There are so many great administrators. When I came into the Western Collegiate Hockey Association, they told me you're going to deal a lot with presidents of the universities, and I had never had that kind of background to say that I dealt with a lot of presidents of universities. But I found that all of them respected where I had come from and what I was doing, and the fact that I was transparent and open and would take their calls at a moment's notice and talk to them about what's happening. And each year we had a chairman of the league who was a president of one of the universities, and I got to be very close to the 4 or 5. I think it was every year, but I think one year we had somebody had the job for 2.5 years. But other than that, I had four great presidents that I worked with, and they were fabulous to me. I just didn't know what I didn't know at the time was how I was going to deal with them. I was dealing with the coaches, and I was dealing with the athletic directors. I was dealing with the faculty reps as well, but I had never really dealt with the presidents. So this was a new thing for me, and I really enjoyed that piece and hearing them talk from an educational perspective, and always thinking about how does this affect the university? How does this affect these young men playing hockey? And I had a stint as the women's commissioner at the same time. When we lost one of our women's commissioners to another job, I took that over on an interim basis, doing both men's and women's commissioner work, which is not an easy task during the course of the season, but I thought it was the right thing to do, representing the shield of the WCHA.
You've had so many relationships, you've done so many different things, and over the course of you doing it, whether it's with the NHL or the WCHA or the USHL, you've been able to reinvent yourself. And I think that's something that has been talked about in the way in which you've been able to adapt with the times. What is it about you, Bill, that you are able to take on new experiences, new challenges, and thrive no matter what it is?
Well, I appreciate that wonderful comment. Some days I wonder if I have all that far, but I think for me, I've always looked at it as you can always learn, you can always do more and do other things. And I think when my dad was a high school teacher after getting out of the war, and he was an athlete, and he taught at the same high school for 36 years. I think those jobs have gone away for the most part. I think people are in jobs. I don't want to say there's a correct time frame, but anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And then it's like coaches or athletic directors, they move on to the next job because sometimes you need a new voice and you need to hear new ideas. And I have always had ideas. I would think that has served me very well. And I've been open and adaptive to change. where a lot of my colleagues always did the same things. I mean, I take great pride in at the Wild. They asked me to start up their Twitter account back when before Twitter was started, and I'd have to post stuff about 6 times a day. At the time, it was um, very rudimentary at the time how it was presented. Now they have one person handling just the Twitter account because it's such a big deal for pro sports teams, and even at the USHL, it's a huge tool that we use. But I don't think I could do that and then do the other 10 things I was doing really well. If I do something, I want to do it really well. It's not that I can only be one dimensional, but you can only do so many things in a day and night. And I couldn't remember if I had posted something or not after a while. You're like coming and going at the same time. But I enjoyed that piece. And that was something that was new to sports. I remember going to NHL meetings in Canada and telling people that the Wild had started up this Twitter account. And I asked if anybody else had set up a Twitter account. None of them had. And of course, within a month, they were all calling saying, what is this about? And I didn't really know what it was about, but I was open to learning that this is a new forum for people to communicate in a short and succinct way. And it's become, as you know, a huge tool besides websites and besides Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all those other social media platforms that are out there. I feel really good that I was able to start up something like that.
Twitter has been something that you've been able to hone in on, and you have been this medium yourself in ushering in the next generation of how media influences communications and how it influences covering sports. And you have been, Bill, this dependable, awe-inspiring, steady voice in the business of sports. And it's been really fun to have this conversation with you. Bill Robertson with the United States Hockey League. Such an honor to have you on with you. I'm Bryan Fenley. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brian. It was enjoyable. Hope we can do it again sometime.